It made me cry, and I don't really cry in a lot of books. So take with that what you will about this. Hello, welcome to Books and Booze. This is a series where I have some booze and I talk about books. I'm Alex. Although I won't be having any booze this time because I'm going through Lent, so I'm going to actually be having some apple juice instead. So pour some of that out. And perhaps absolutely apt and excellent book for the Lent season. This time I'll be talking about Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory. Cheers to Graham Greene and The Power and the Glory. Let's get into it. The Power and the Glory is a 1940 novel by the British writer Graham Greene. The title alludes to part of a doxology, often recited at the end of the Lord's Prayer, "For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." It's a fascinating read, and it really pulls on Graham's own experience as he visited Mexico during the time this book is set, around 1938. Apparently, he was trying to dodge a libel claim. I've just heard this kind of on some things in passing, for calling out potential pedophilic attitudes in a Shirley Temple movie. I just gotta say, what a boss. I mean, if that's your reason to dodge a libel claim, I think that's a pretty badass one to go on. Yeah. And he actually became a Christian during this time because of the faith he witnessed on display during the persecutions that this book explores. With his travels to Mexico in 1938, he just was absolutely shocked by this persecution being brought on by radical socialist regimes taking over the Mexican government at the time. And they provided the material for a nonfiction travel book called The Lawless Road, or The Lawless Roads, which I'll probably pick up at some point, and The Power and the Glory. And this one is an absolute success. It's probably one of at least his most famous writings, and it earned him a lot of acclaim and got him the Hawthorne Din Award. But it also earned him the fury of the Vatican at the time. Catholic bishops and cardinals who read it thought it focused a lot on the wretchedness of human beings and painted a too negative picture of the priesthood. I think that remains up for debate. So what is this novel about that earned the fury of the Vatican, although I think that's definitely changed over the decades? Well, it's about this whiskey priest who is one of the last practicing Catholic priests in the region, and he's on the run. He's pursued by authorities, namely this specific lieutenant in the, I think they call them redcoats or red jackets, probably look like one wearing this, but the socialist regimes that are taking over and trying to just rid this area of religion. That's the book. Yeah. So usually at this point I talk about some things that I don't like in the book, and I don't have anything for this. I'm about to just gush over this book because it's probably one of my favorites of all time. After reading it now, I'm kind of like obsessed with it a little bit. So what did I like? I mean, even from the beginning, I was really into it. You get this really cool fragmented introduction section. So if you go and you seek this out, like be aware that the entire first section is like disparate characters that's just giving you a feeling for the landscape. And I'll say this here, but there are probably just going to be spoilers throughout this video, unlike some of my other ones. So I'll try to put up something if I go into anything like too much of a spoiler for the plot, but I also feel like this is one of those stories that you can't really spoil it because so much of it's just the experience of how well crafted it is and reading through it. Like I said, the introduction, you're not really aware how these characters fit into the narrative in the first part, and some of them just like kind of don't. But it's already inviting you into this world that, for a lot of us, is just something we have no idea what it's like to inhabit. I mean, there's even like a great experience of reflecting back on this introduction because, like, for example, there's this dentist character, Mr. Tinch, at the beginning who is talking to this one character who you're not even aware is a priest until kind of like upon further reflection. You just think it's kind of this kind of odd encounter. And then what you also even get in that first section just throughout the entire course of the book is just insane prose. I mean, this book is amazing at showing and not telling, like anything at all. Crazy beautiful language. throughout the entirety of the book. I felt like I could read it again right after I finished reading it. Let me dive into a little bit of an example of the prose here. So in this specific part alone, the priest, he gets caught like multiple times, though they don't know he's a priest throughout the most of the times he's captured. So this is actually one of the times he's in a jail cell. I think it's like a general holding cell. He's in. There's all these different kinds of people, and some of them are learning that he's a priest. He giggled, no, thieves, murderers. Oh well, my child. If you had more experience, you would know there are worse things to be. The old man seemed to be uneasily asleep. His head lay sideways against the priest's shoulder, and he muttered angrily. God knows it had never been easy to move in this place, but the difficulty seemed to increase as the night wore on and limbs stiffened. He couldn't twitch his shoulder now without waking the old man to another night of suffering. Well, he thought, it was my kind who robbed him. It's only fair to be made a little uncomfortable. He sat silent and rigid against the damp wall, with his dead feet under his haunches. The mosquitoes droned on. It was no good defending yourself by striking at the air. They pervaded the whole place like an element. Someone as well as the old man had fallen asleep and was snoring, a curious note of satisfaction, as though he had eaten and drunk well at a good dinner, and was now taking a snooze. The priest tried to calculate the hour. How much time has passed since he met the beggar in the plaza? It was probably not long after midnight. There would be more hours of this. It was, of course, the end, but at the same time you had to be prepared for everything, even escape. If God intended him to escape, he would snatch him away from the front of the firing squad. But God was merciful. There was only one reason, surely, which would make him refuse his peace, if there was any peace, that he could still be of use in saving a soul, his own or another's. But what good could he do now? They had him on the run. He dared not enter a village in case somebody else should pay with his life, perhaps a man who was in mortal sin and unrepentant. It was impossible to say what souls might not be lost simply because he was obstinate and proud and wouldn't admit defeat. And even getting into some of these characters that you're kind of seeing in this jail cell, this holding cell, the side characters are incredibly realized throughout the course of this book. Like, for example, there's another priest that kind of is an antithesis, Padre Jose. He did the bidding of the radical socialists. He kind of recanted and he married off, and he doesn't practice Christianity outwardly anymore, at least. And you're roped into this character of just kind of asking, like, is he truly pathetic? He comes across that way. He takes ownership of that, but perhaps he's weak. You follow him, he's mocked by children, but he has this inner turmoil continuously within him that you're invited in to witness. Even small characters like people in villages, that they have this complexity to them that some writers rely on an entire book to craft, and Greene does it in like a single paragraph, at times just a couple sentences. And I think the priest has this child who's a great example of that. Of course, priest shouldn't father a child, so it's even more maybe the complexity that you can get from this very strange dynamic he has of this hidden away family. He has this draw to the kid, and the kid has this draw to him, where it's like a love-hate thing, and the priest kind of looks on to this child with a sense of disgust, yet he just is overwhelmed by the desire to protect and love her. And I was really drawn to that duality that the priest experiences when looking at the child. She's ugly and vile, yet also pretty, and he wants to embrace her and protect her. I think it's sort of a stand-in and a way that Graham's placing this short metaphor here for our relationship with God as a father. There's a lot of that here, a lot of these just single moments that you can pull greater spiritual themes and understanding out of. But that's probably one of the more like in-your-face moments of it, at least it was in my read-through. And overall, this is just really big on the theme of suffering, how it strengthens us. You see this through the priest as he goes on these trials. It transforms him, even if the protagonist, the priest himself, is not fully aware of it. And it's questionable if he ever is by the end of the book. You are invited to question how the suffering remains upon the protagonist and how much is imposed as well. Given its ultimate conclusion, where he knowingly kind of walks into a trap, you have to ask how much of it is imposed. Or is it simply to be some kind of turning from God throughout multiple moments that is causing it for him, which is also him imposing it on himself. And that gets into just the general idea, the motif of the whiskey priest and alcohol and its presence in the novel is a big part of this. The use of the alcohol is actually replaced with a more natural revealing of the true self. And all characters are sort of aware of this importance of alcohol of all different kinds throughout the course of the story. And it's banned in the country. That's an important tidbit to share there. Namely, to try and stop mass from happening by banning wine, but there's a total ban altogether. But mainly, the authorities care if people are in possession of wine. Most others can kind of get away on the black market of dealing, namely with whiskey and brandy, which is the poison of the priest's choice. And I think it's really interesting because it's not only used in the context of the Eucharist and taking communion in the novel, but it just acts as the Eucharist outside of even that context of the Mass, which is maybe something that kind of peeved the Vatican at the time. It overall reveals one's desires, one's sins, one's selfhood, and it brings into light the questioning and kind of the constructivity of community. One of my favorite scenes involves around just men drinking together. The priest is with this bootlegger and the chief of the police, and they all don't know who each other is, and they all deeply connect over sharing some black market wine and some black market whiskey. By the way, apparently the whiskey priest was like an actual piece of propaganda that was used by these socialist groups to try to push people to hate the church more, and Greene just actually uses it as the main character, which is pretty great. Focusing on that priest one last time, I think it's very interesting that the protagonist and the antagonist are only known by the titles. And there's one character who's very dynamic, the priest, and there's one who's very static, the lieutenant. They both want to believe that they are doing what is good. The lieutenant showcases this in some kind of trauma response. It's a bit vague, but you have an idea there's a personal vendetta against the church. Greene also had a traumatic childhood that I think kind of complicated a lot of the same things for himself as it did with the lieutenant character, which is probably why he's such a damn good character. But they both have another duality that appears. They both respect each other in the end of the novel, and they also despise something about each other. Almost against their own will, something compels them to despise each other. And that gets toward the end of the book, and look, it made me cry, and I don't really cry at a lot of books. So take with that what you will about this. I mean, it's a true what is shown as the priest. Here's a big spoiler. I'll put a timestamp. What is shown as the priest is alone in a jail cell. He can't get Padre Jose to come and do confession for him. It's just a true act of confession and repentance. It is a genuine need and desire to be close to God as he prepares for an execution. But he's totally alone with God. And you're given a snippet of that, what it looks like to really be in that position, to have it imposed on you. It's really raw. There's something really raw about the ending of this book, and it's seemingly this massive moment that it's built up by that moment of confession and repentance. But then Greene does this insane thing where he pulls it out and he shows it all in a really mundane manner, and then that sort of fragmented intro returns a bit to showcase how the priest has entered this larger than life existence. He achieves what he believes would be the greatest good he could possibly do, which is entering a sort of sense of sainthood, to become a beacon that can lead to saving people's souls. But that's seemingly through the grace of God. We don't really get to know his true feelings about the execution or where his heart is in those last moments. I mean, it's not pretty, the way the execution is described and his behavior during it. It's not noble in any way. But his flaws and the turmoil we witness with him are moved as he enters the sainthood. And we know he's no saint. And the novel seems to kind of want to deconstruct and allude to, really picking apart, even these people we put up on these beacons, they're human beings as well. That's probably another reason the Vatican hated it too. Ultimately, I think this novel wants to show love, hope, and beauty in a landscape that ultimately doesn't want those things to thrive. I think that's even timely now, and it probably always will be. So, toast of excellence for the power and the glory. Absolutely, I think this is one of my all-time favorite books now. Definitely top 10. It might be top 5. It just fired on all cylinders for me. So cheers to the power and the glory, and to Graham Greene. I won't say too much of a rundown about who this is for. I think it's for just anyone that likes damn good writing and damn good storytelling. Just go get it. It's phenomenal. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have you read The Power and the Glory? Are you interested in it? Let me know what you either got from the book when you went through it, or maybe what you're thinking about it and considering about it in the comments below. I'd love to start a discussion about that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps other people get this in their feed and gets more people to the channel. If you didn't like this video, also let me know that. Anything helps me. If you like longer form book reviews, kind of like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm continuously trying to put these out. Also, if you like video essays around different cultural products, mainly movies is what I talk about, I have different video essays around different topics on the channel, so maybe go seek those out, see if any of those interest you. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in our next exploration.